I didn't realize how tired I'd become of tiptoeing around my own home until the morning I found myself eating breakfast in my car just to avoid another argument. It wasn't dramatic or loud, just that quiet, creeping dread that settles in when someone you love starts treating you like an inconvenience. My sister Amanda had a way of turning small things into loaded silences, and lately those silences felt heavier than anything we ever said out loud. That morning, sitting in my parked car with a soggy cereal bar, I knew something in our house had shifted long before I could put words to it. My everyday life was pretty simple. I worked full-time at a hardware store a few miles from home. Amanda worked evenings at a local diner. After our mom passed, we promised we'd keep the house running together, split things evenly, stay close, try not to let grief turn us into strangers. At first, it felt like we were honoring that promise. We cooked together once a week, kept the place clean, handled bills without fuss. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Then little cracks started forming. I'd come home and notice the trash overflowing onto the floor. Amanda would walk right past it with her headphones on like it didn't even exist. When I took it out, she'd just shrug and say, "You always do it better anyway." It sounded casual, almost like a compliment, but it carried this weird edge, like she expected me to absorb every chore she didn't feel like doing. Next came the dishes. If she cooked, she left the pots in the sink to soak for 2 or 3 days. When I cooked, she'd appear just long enough to eat and then vanish to her room without saying a word. I kept telling myself it was grief, maybe stress, maybe long shifts at the diner. I didn't want to believe she was slipping into old patterns, the ones she used to have as a teenager when she'd get cold, petty, and quietly mean. But the tone changes were harder to ignore. If I asked about her day, she'd give clipped answers like I was interviewing her for something. If I asked whether she could handle a bill that was hers to cover, she'd get defensive and accuse me of keeping score. If I left my shoes near the door for even a minute, she'd make a comment sharp enough to sting, but soft enough that calling it out made me feel dramatic. One night she said, "It must be nice not worrying about real responsibilities," because I'd bought groceries after my shift instead of cleaning the living room. I stood there holding a bag of apples, suddenly aware that no matter what I did, she'd find a way to twist it. The turning point came a week later when she borrowed my paycheck. I came home from work and noticed the envelope I'd left on my dresser was gone. Amanda didn't even pretend to hide it. She'd taken it to pay off an overdue bill she'd ignored for months. Instead of apologizing, she acted offended that I was upset. "You live here too," she said. "It's not like you're struggling." That line stuck to me like burrs. It wasn't just the money. It was the assumption that my effort, my work, my stability existed for her convenience. Later that night, lying in bed, I finally admitted something to myself. The version of Amanda I was living with wasn't the sister I knew. She wasn't grieving. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was taking advantage of me because I made it easy. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The tension in the house wasn't random. It was growing. Quietly, intentionally. And for the first time, I felt something in me start to harden. Not anger exactly, but a clear, steady recognition that this wasn't going to get better on its own. Something needed to change. The week after Amanda took my paycheck felt like walking on a rug that someone kept tugging just enough to throw off my balance. Nothing she did was loud or dramatic, but every little thing felt like it had a second meaning. She barely spoke to me unless she needed something. And when she did talk, her tone carried this strange mix of entitlement and irritation, like I was failing a test I didn't know I was taking. The breaking point started with the electric bill. It was her month to cover it, something she'd agreed to when we first set up the budget. When the notice came in, I put it on the kitchen table with a sticky note, "Due Friday." She saw it. She walked right past it. She even used the table to sort her makeup bag that same evening, but she didn't touch the bill. Friday morning, I asked if she'd paid it. She rolled her eyes and told me she hadn't gotten around to it. No apology, no explanation. Just this casual expectation that I'd do it for her. By the third notice, I paid it myself because I didn't want the lights shut off. When she saw me doing it online, she said, "Well, you get home earlier anyway, so it makes sense." Like responsibility was dictated by convenience. That was when I started noticing patterns. Every time she skipped a chore or avoided a bill, she framed it as if she was the one being burdened. If I didn't immediately agree to her version of things, she'd get snappy or give me the silent treatment for the rest of the night. She used guilt like some people use door locks, subtle, constant, and meant to control the flow of everything. Then the family betrayal dropped. It was a Saturday morning when my aunt called. She asked if everything was okay because Amanda had told her I refused to help with the house and that she was basically supporting me. I almost dropped the phone. Not only was it untrue, it was the exact opposite of our reality. My aunt sounded worried. She said you're not keeping up and she's overwhelmed, she told me. I felt my stomach clench. Amanda wasn't just manipulating me. She was creating a narrative, a version of our life where she was the one holding things together and I was the one falling apart. And she was spreading that story to family who trusted her. That hit harder than the stolen paycheck. It meant she knew what she was doing. She wasn't struggling. She wasn't confused. She was protecting an image while shifting the blame onto me. That night, I confronted her, calmly because losing my temper wouldn't help. I said, "Why are you telling people you're supporting me?" She blinked at me with this practiced innocence. "I never said that. You must have misunderstood." When I told her the exact words my aunt used, she shot back with, "Well, maybe if you actually helped, people wouldn't assume I'm doing everything." Like it was my fault for not controlling other people's opinions. Something in me cracked wide open. It wasn't grief. It wasn't stress. It wasn't a phase. It was a pattern. The same pattern she'd had as a teenager when she'd pit people against each other to avoid responsibility. And I realized she was getting bold because she thought I'd never push back. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, that steady hardness inside me turned into something clearer. A decision. I wasn't going to keep being her safety net. I wasn't going to let her twist the story until I looked like the problem. And I definitely wasn't going to let her dig a deeper hole in the family while I stayed quiet. If she wanted to build a narrative, fine. I'd give her the space to show everyone exactly who she was, without me covering for her. I was done tolerating it. Once I made the decision to stop covering for Amanda, the whole house felt different. Not lighter, not yet, but clearer. I stopped picking up after her. I stopped paying her bills just to keep things running. I didn't argue. I didn't nag. I just let the natural consequences land where they belonged. And that alone was enough to make the tension in the house thicken like steam. The first change happened when she ran out of clean bowls. She'd always dump her dishes into the sink and walk away, expecting I'd eventually wash them. But this time, I didn't touch a thing. By the fourth day, the sink was stacked so high she couldn't make breakfast. She came into my room holding an empty cereal box and snapped, "Are you seriously not doing your share anymore?" I kept my voice calm. "I did my share. Those dishes are yours." Her face tightened. She didn't argue, which was unusual for her, but she slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Still, she washed them, quietly. That was the first real crack in her routine. My plan wasn't dramatic. It wasn't flashy. It was simple. Stop shielding her, keep records, and stay consistent. I started documenting everything. Bills she ignored, chores she skipped, messages from family repeating the lies she'd told them. Not to expose her publicly, but to have proof when the moment came. Amanda's biggest strength was how convincingly she shaped stories. My biggest strength was patience. The next shift came with the water bill. It was her turn again. The envelope sat on the kitchen table for days while she breezed around it like it was invisible. When I reminded her, she snapped, "I'll do it when I get to it." I didn't argue. I just made a note in my phone. Unpaid water bill, day 1. Day 5, the water company left a warning tag on our door. Amanda snatched it before I could, but I saw the panic in her eyes. Instead of accepting responsibility, she turned on me. "Why didn't you pay it? You know my schedule is crazy." I kept my tone steady. "Because it's your month. You agreed to that." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again when she realized I wasn't bending. Without a word, she stormed out. Later that night, I heard her on the phone with one of our cousins, spinning a new story about how overwhelmed she was and how I'd stopped helping around the house entirely. It was almost impressive how quickly she could rewrite a situation. That call became the turning point. Not for her, but for my plan. If she wanted to paint me as the unreliable one, I'd make sure she had no room left to hide behind excuses. I began keeping a clean, simple record of everything in a notebook. Dates, chores, bills, comments, who handled what. Nothing dramatic, just facts. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. My aunt called again, confused and a little frustrated. "Amanda says you've checked out completely," she said. "She told us the house is falling apart because she's doing everything alone." Instead of defending myself, I asked my aunt if she could stop by the house that weekend. "I think it's easier to talk in person," I said. She agreed. And suddenly the plan snapped into place with a quiet clarity. If Amanda wanted to build a narrative, I would give the family a front row seat to the truth, without yelling, without accusing, without anything that could be twisted back on me. I spent the next 2 days cleaning only my own spaces. My room, my laundry, my dishes. I left everything of hers untouched. The living room clutter, hers. The pile of laundry on the couch, hers. The stack of unopened bills on the counter, all hers. By the time Saturday came, the house told the story for me. When my aunt walked in, she didn't need explanations. Her eyes scanned the mess, the dishes, the trash bags, the bills Amanda had claimed she'd been personally handling. I stayed quiet, letting her take it in naturally. Amanda looked caught off guard, like she hadn't expected reality to show up uninvited. My aunt didn't say anything sharp or dramatic. She just asked calmly, "Amanda, what's been going on here?" And that was the moment everything shifted. Amanda stumbled through excuses, talking fast, contradicting herself. My aunt looked at me, then at the mess again, and the truth clicked into place without a single word from me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. I'd let Amanda dig her own hole, and she had, deeper than I ever could have forced her to. Amanda didn't crumble right away. She tried to salvage the situation, switching between excuses and half-formed explanations, as my aunt listened with that quiet, disappointed calm only older family members seemed to master. I stood off to the side, leaning against the doorway, not saying anything unless I was directly asked. It wasn't about humiliating her. I just wasn't willing to protect a version of events that never happened. My aunt asked simple, grounded questions. "When did you last clean this room? Whose bills are these? Why is your laundry on the couch?" Amanda kept trying to lace her answers with blame, but each one unraveled the moment it left her mouth. The house was too honest, too obvious. It didn't match anything she'd told people. Eventually, my aunt turned to me. "And you? Have you been doing your part?" I didn't defend myself. I didn't list anything out. I just said, "I handle my responsibilities. I stopped doing Amanda's when she stopped doing hers." No edge, no bitterness, just the truth. My aunt nodded slowly. Then she asked Amanda, "You said you were overwhelmed because you were doing everything, but from what I'm seeing, that doesn't look true." The air in the room tightened. Amanda crossed her arms, staring at the floor. "Well, I've had a lot going on," she muttered. My aunt didn't raise her voice. She just said, "Everyone has things going on, but lying about your brother isn't acceptable." Hearing someone else call it what it was, lying, made something in my chest loosen for the first time in months. It wasn't vindication in some dramatic movie way. It was more like finally exhaling after holding your breath for too long. Amanda didn't argue anymore. She didn't apologize either, which didn't surprise me. She just retreated into her room like a wounded cat. My aunt helped me straighten the living room a little before she left, but mostly she just talked about coping with grief, about boundaries, about how sometimes family needs clarity, not coddling. The fallout didn't explode overnight. It was slower, quieter. The next week, Amanda handled her bill on time without being prompted. She washed her dishes. She even folded the laundry that had been sitting on the couch. But none of it came with a thank you or an apology. It was like she was trying to reset the rhythm without acknowledging the mess she'd made along the way. And honestly, I was fine with that. I wasn't looking for a dramatic confession. I just wanted fairness and room to breathe in my own home again. A few weeks later, my aunt called to check in. She said Amanda had reached out, sounding embarrassed but more grounded. Apparently, she'd admitted she'd been exaggerating things to make herself look better. It wasn't a full truth, but it was closer than anything she'd said to me. At home, things settled into something that resembled balance. Not perfect, but functional. We talked more clearly about chores. She covered her bills without reminders. I stopped feeling like I was being pulled underwater by someone else's story. The real closure came one night when Amanda lingered in the hallway after I got home from work. She didn't look at me directly, but her voice was quiet when she said, "I'm trying to do better." It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was the closest she'd ever come. I accepted it for what it was, a small, honest step. Living with family means dealing with old patterns that try to creep back in when things go wrong. But it also means giving room for growth, even when the path there isn't pretty. The moral, at least for me, was simple. You can love someone and still refuse to be their shield. You can support family without letting them rewrite the story at your expense. And sometimes the quietest revenge is letting the truth speak louder than you ever could. That was enough for me.